During the day, an office building regulates its own safety. The constant hum of hundreds of workers, the overlapping sightlines, and the sheer volume of human presence all naturally govern security and deter external threats. But remove those people, and the architecture takes on a different quality. Psychologists call this a liminal space, a transitional environment explicitly designed to accommodate large crowds. When a person occupies a liminal space alone, the brain registers the vast emptiness as unnatural, triggering a continuous low-level stress response. The graveyard shift amplifies this effect. Without human activity to fill the space, the night creates a psychological void where every creak or flickering light demands absolute attention, inviting perceived threats into the silence. This flowchart categorizes the anomalies reported by isolated night shift workers. By analyzing these accounts, we can group the threats into 3 distinct archetypes that prey on solitary employees: the unseen, the psychological, and the physical. A graveyard shift does more than invert a sleep schedule. It removes the social architecture that anchors our sense of safety, leaving an individual alone with phenomena that require total isolation to take hold. Consider a security guard stationed alone in a commercial building. At 2:30 a.m., their only interaction with the environment happens through a bank of silent monitors. Security cameras provide an illusion of omnipotence. You can see every floor and every hallway all at once. That sense of control shatters the moment you observe a physical impossibility, like a heavy, fire-rated door on the empty 3rd floor, slowly swinging open on its own. Investigating an anomaly in person removes the safety of the screen. The guard reached the 3rd floor, found the door wide open, and walked inside. The space was empty. Then, behind him, he heard a whisper. He spun around to find an empty hallway. But the next morning, he reviewed the server's video playback. The wide-angle camera above the door captured his exact path into the room, and it captured the distinct shape of an entity walking in immediately behind him. The unseen threat archetype highlights the limits of surveillance. While sensors are designed to track physical intruders, they offer no protection when a worker is exposed to an experience they cannot logically explain. A 24-hour call center presents a different environment. At 3 a.m., the facility is locked down, requiring keycard access for entry. The worker inside believes they are entirely physically sealed off from the external world. Then the phone rings. No caller ID registers on the terminal. The worker picks up, asks for a name, and receives only heavy breathing in response. A few seconds later, a voice whispers over the line, "Why are you still there?" The worker immediately terminates the connection. When the phone rings a second time from the exact unlisted source, they ignore the headset. Instead, they check the digital switchboard to trace the origin of the signal. This architectural floor plan illustrates the path of that incoming call. The routing data confirms the signal did not breach the building's external network. It was originating from a vacant desk, located 20 feet away in the exact same locked room. The inside threat archetype violates the core rule of spatial security. A deadbolted door prevents an intruder from walking in, but it also ensures that if an anomaly originates from within, the worker is trapped inside with it. We see the ultimate physical vulnerability at an isolated gas station on the outskirts of town. At 1 a.m., a glass-walled convenience store acts as a highly illuminated beacon, surrounded by miles of unlit rural darkness. A car pulls up, but the driver delays entry. He stands in the dark, watching the lone clerk through the illuminated glass. When he finally steps inside, he ignores the merchandise. He approaches the counter, stares at the clerk, and delivers a cryptic warning. "You shouldn't be here tonight." The man leaves and drives away. 10 minutes later, the grid fails. The fluorescent lights cut out entirely, plunging the clerk's highly visible safe zone into total darkness. Headlights sweep across the parking lot. The same car has returned. The driver doesn't try to enter. He simply idles in the dark, watching the storefront. When police finally respond to the clerk's emergency call, the vehicle is gone. The responding officer notes a terrifying detail. Multiple agencies have reports of that exact car specifically stalking night shift employees. The physical predator removes all supernatural abstraction from the equation. When you subtract the safety of a crowd and the security of daylight, you are reduced to a biological absolute. You become prey. Across all three of these accounts, the mechanism of terror remains identical: a camera catching an entity, a switchboard routing an impossible call, and a stalker cutting the power, all exploit the exact same variable: absolute isolation. Society naturally functions as a collective defense system. A crowd diffuses targeted threats, establishing a solid perimeter of mutual protection. The graveyard shift dismantles this perimeter. By removing the population, the worker is left to anchor the space alone, stripping away natural deterrents. We rely on an invisible workforce to maintain the logistics of modern life, while the rest of the world sleeps. To keep that 24-hour economy running, these workers sacrifice the safety of the pack, facing the quiet of the night on their own. Some environments are simply incompatible with the solitary human mind. If you enjoyed these case studies, make sure to subscribe and let me know if you want a part 2. Because some nights are better left alone. Humans are diurnal. Our biology is calibrated for the daytime, which is why we build offices, call centers, and gas stations to accommodate dozens or even hundreds of people. From a survival standpoint, these environments offer a specific benefit: safety in numbers. When night falls, that human element is removed. While the people leave, the physical infrastructure remains operational. The fluorescent lights stay on and the air conditioning hums, but the primary purpose of the space, human occupancy, is gone. Architects call this a liminal space. On the left, daytime functionality, density, and movement. On the right, the nighttime void. The identical structure now lacks movement. Isolating a single human here removes defensive cover, triggering hypervigilance as they become the sole focus. Working the night shift removes the protection of the group. It places a solitary worker inside a brightly lit environment that was designed for crowds, creating a unique state of isolation. This isolation is a constant reality for night security guards. They are responsible for monitoring massive, multi-story office complexes entirely alone. One guard reported that the silence of his building broke at 2:30 a.m. He heard the sound of footsteps coming from the 3rd floor, a restricted area that he knew for a fact was empty. He checked the security monitors. The rooms appeared empty, until he watched one of the heavy office doors swing open slowly, as if someone had just walked through it. He investigated the floor in person. The hallway was empty, but the door he saw on camera now swung wide open into the dark room. As he stepped inside, he heard a distinct whisper directly behind his ear. When he turned around, the hallway was still empty. The following morning, the guard reviewed the recorded footage of his own investigation. The camera showed him entering the room, but it also captured an unseen secondary figure walking into the office immediately behind him. The guard resigned that same day. This incident highlights the failure of a secure space. We use cameras to project a sense of control over large buildings, but in total isolation, those cameras often only document how vulnerable we are to threats we cannot see. Auditory paranoia often replaces visual fear in closed environments. In a 24-hour call center at 3 a.m., external human interaction typically drops to 0, turning the office into a sealed system. One worker received a call from an unlisted number in the middle of the night. When they answered, they heard heavy breathing and a voice whispering a single question: "Why are you still there?" The worker hung up, but the phone rang again immediately from the same number. This time, the worker let it ring. As the phone continued to ring, the worker realized the sound was not coming from their own desk. The ringing was echoing through the open office, originating from another empty workstation further down the row. This diagram shows the concept of a contaminated sanctuary. The visual vectors demonstrate that the call originated from inside the safe zone rather than crossing the exterior boundary. The psychological dread stems from the realization that the threat has already bypassed all external defenses. This exterior shot illustrates extreme exposure. The brightly lit glass-walled gas station functions as a glowing box surrounded by an ocean of darkness. At 1 a.m., a lone attendant watched a car pull into the lot. The driver stepped out but remained in the shadows, staring through the glass at the worker for over a minute before finally entering the store. The man walked through the aisles without picking up any items. He eventually approached the counter, leaned in, and told the attendant, "You shouldn't be here tonight," before driving away. 10 minutes later, the gas station suffered a total power outage. In the sudden darkness, a set of headlights illuminated the front glass. The same car had returned to the lot. The driver sat in the car and watched the darkened building until the police arrived. The responding officer later confirmed that the vehicle was linked to reports of a suspect following night workers. This fishbowl effect turns the worker into a highlighted subject within a void. The horror shifts from a psychological suspicion to a documented physical threat where the worker is visible and the predator is hidden. The common denominator in these stories is the vulnerability that is reaction as an evolutionary primal warning. This dread functions as a biological alarm system triggered when an environment replicates the conditions of a hunting ground. Human survival is tied to the group. Operating outside of the herd triggers ancient prey instincts because the nighttime environment lacks the natural defenses we rely on during the day. If you are ever isolated in a brightly lit, empty building and feel a sudden urge to leave, you should listen to that instinct. If you want to see more investigations into these spaces, subscribe and let us know in the comments. Some nights are better left alone. During the day, an office building or a retail store is a site of constant noise and movement. It feels safe, but that security vanishes once the sun goes down and the crowds filter out, leaving a single person to lock the doors. Occupying a space built for hundreds while entirely alone creates a specific psychological pressure. When the architecture around you is designed for a crowd, the silence doesn't feel empty, it feels heavy. Isolation strips away our oldest evolutionary defense, the safety of the herd. Without other people to ground our perception, the human brain begins to interpret every ambient creak or flicker as an immediate physical threat. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., this isolation deepens. We see how the danger shifts as night moves toward its darkest point. As the clock ticks forward, the encounters escalate. They move from external dangers to threats that defy logic. At 1 a.m., the danger is usually anchored in the physical world. Consider the worker at a gas station on the outskirts of town, miles from the nearest open business. A car pulls up to the pumps. The driver steps out, but instead of walking toward the register, he stands frozen in the parking lot. He simply stares through the glass storefront at the lone attendant. When he finally enters, he doesn't buy anything. He just paces the aisles before stopping at the counter to deliver a single, quiet warning. You shouldn't be here tonight. He leaves, but the situation rapidly deteriorates. 10 minutes later, the station's power cuts out. In the total darkness, headlights sweep across the pavement. The same car has returned, idling in the shadows, just watching the front door. The worker called the police from a locked back room. The car vanished before they arrived, but the responding officer confirmed the fear. They had been tracking that exact vehicle for weeks as it followed solo night workers across the county. This 1 a.m. encounter reveals the extreme fragility of a night worker's position. Often, a single pane of glass is the only thing separating you from a predator. By 2:30 a.m., the isolation is no longer just a physical concern. In a massive, empty office building, a security guard is the only person for 3 blocks in any direction. He hears footsteps on the 3rd floor. He checks the live camera feed and watches as a heavy door, one he knows is locked, swings wide open on its own. He goes upstairs to investigate. The hallway is empty, and the door is open. As he steps inside, he hears a clear, distinct whisper right behind his ear. He spins his flashlight around, but there is nothing there. He quit the next morning after reviewing the high-definition security footage. The camera showed him walking into the room, followed immediately by an unseen entity that trailed just inches behind his shoulder. At 2:30 a.m., even your equipment can betray you. The security camera stops being a tool for safety and becomes recorded proof that you cannot trust your own eyes. We reach 3 a.m., the dead of night. Inside a silent 24-hour call center, a worker sits among rows of empty desks. A call comes in with no caller ID. When the worker answers, there is no voice, only the steady, heavy sound of someone breathing into the receiver. A voice eventually whispers, "Why are you still there?" before the line goes dead. Seconds later, the phone rings again. The worker looks at the display and realizes the call is originating from inside the office. It's coming from an internal extension at a desk just 10 feet away. By 3 a.m., the concept of a secure perimeter has failed. The threat is no longer outside the building. It is sharing the room with you. This timeline shows a steady erosion of safety. We move from a physical stalker at 1 a.m. to an invisible presence at 2:30, to a breach from within the room at 3. The night shift forces a person to exist in a state where normal human defenses are systematically stripped away. It is an active, nightly exposure to total vulnerability. Every glowing gas station or illuminated office window you pass tonight is an island. For the people inside, the silence is often far more crowded than it looks. Some nights are better left alone. If you want a part 2, subscribe to the channel. And if you've had an unexplainable experience working the night shift, share it in the comments below. While the rest of the world sleeps, an unseen army of silent workers maintains our 24/7 global infrastructure. During the day, our workspaces offer a psychological shield. We rely on herd safety, the evolutionary security that comes from being surrounded by others, providing constant visibility and mutual protection. The graveyard shift strips away this safety net. As the sun sets and the crowds vanish, office buildings and warehouses transform from shared hubs into isolated islands, leaving the night workers as solitary targets. This floor plan shows the liminal vacuum. It is a space designed for a population of hundreds, yet occupied by a single individual, a mismatch between architectural purpose and physical reality. 3 first-hand accounts from these workers reveal a terrifying spatial pattern, showing exactly how danger moves when the social perimeter collapses. The true horror of the night shift is the realization that distance is the only thing keeping you safe. At 1 a.m., a gas station on the outskirts of town sits at the edge of the outer perimeter, miles from the nearest open business. This schematic shows asymmetric visibility. Because the station is the only light source for miles, the worker inside is perfectly illuminated. However, their own vision stops at the glass, as the internal glare makes the surrounding darkness impenetrable. This vulnerability was exploited when a man stepped out of his car and simply stood in the darkness, staring through the glass. He eventually entered the store, ignored the merchandise, and told the clerk, "You shouldn't be here tonight," before driving away. 10 minutes later, the perimeter's technology failed as the power cut out, plunging the station into total darkness. Then, the headlights of the same car flickered on in the parking lot, watching the building from the blackness. After the worker called for help, the police confirmed a disturbing pattern. They had multiple reports of that exact car methodically following night shift workers across the county. The outer perimeter failed because a glass wall is not a barrier. It is a display case for anyone waiting in the dark. Even behind the locked doors of a multi-story office building, the perimeter can be compromised from within. For a security guard working the late shift, the first sign of a breach was the sound of footsteps on the 3rd floor, a level that was supposed to be empty and electronically locked. A monitor in the security booth showed the failure of the building's internal defenses. An office door was slowly opening on its own. The guard investigated the floor, finding the hallway deserted. But as he stepped into the room, he heard a whisper directly behind his ear. When he turned around, the space was empty. The next morning, the security footage clarified what had happened. The tape showed the guard entering the office, and tracking inches behind his shoulder, a second dark figure followed him through the threshold. When locks fail to maintain a boundary, the worker is no longer alone. They are trapped inside a compromised space with an intruder. The final stage of a perimeter collapse occurs when the threat originates from the worker's immediate vicinity, such as a lone employee in a 3 a.m. call center. An unlogged call came through with no ID. When the worker answered, they heard heavy breathing, followed by a voice asking, "Why are you still there?" Seeking to reestablish a boundary, the worker hung up and ignored the second call that immediately followed. This diagram shows the call routing. The signal did not originate from outside the building. Instead, it came from the phone at the very next desk, an unoccupied station. The breach was absolute. The threat was already sitting at the neighboring desk in the dark. These stories illustrate the profound vulnerability we face when we are isolated from the social structures that protect us. Spaces that feel familiar and safe during the day undergo a fundamental shift at night, becoming territory where the usual rules of security no longer apply. When the perimeter collapses in the middle of the night, there is no one nearby to hear the breach. And remember, some nights are simply better left alone. If you found these accounts as unsettling as we did, subscribe for part 2.